14 games tonight in daily fantasy baseball, and a lot of those are featuring ace-level pitchers. We have got Garrett Cole, Max Scherzer, a ton of great names on this slate, and it's going to be tough to narrow things down and decide which guy we want to rank highest for MLB DFS. Now, obviously, this is a great problem to have because it's better to have too many pitchers than not enough, but it will still require some digging for sure. So we're going to break down who my favorite options are for today, why I'm high on them, and talk about some stacks as well to get you ready for Friday's main slate. Welcome on into the Solo Shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and NumberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for NumberFire, here to break down this 14-game main slate with locks up for 7:05 p.m. Eastern for today. We're going to dig into the weather and much more here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the NumberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Even with the change over to FanDuel Research, we do still have the NumberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. This podcast is going up on the FanDuel YouTube page and on FanDuel TV Plus. Next week, I am out for the entire week. So Tom Vecchio is filling in for me, both in the solo shot and covering the spread, because Tom is a superstar. So check out Tom there. No video version for next week. So just on the audio only podcast platform. You can find that there wherever you get your podcast. So make sure you check that out with Tom next week on the solo shots. There will still be shows just audio only. And then I'm back the week after that. As far as weather for tonight goes, there is a chance of rain in Pittsburgh for the Orioles and the Yankees. They should be okay to play, but I check back on that later, and that's probably the diciest game on tonight's slate. Pittsburgh also not looking great. Again, I check back on that one later. Actually, that one's probably a little bit dicier than the Orioles and the Yankees. Pittsburgh, I do like Zach Wheeler there, but hard to get super excited because there's a chance that game does get rained out. Finally, Chicago dealing with some thunderstorms tonight for the White Sox and the Guardians, and that game could be at risk depending on when the rain gets there. So check back on that one later. So the key spots for weather for tonight: Pittsburgh for the Phillies and the Pirates, Baltimore for the Orioles and the Yankees, and Chicago for the White Sox and the Guardians. And I think that we can navigate around that for finding our top pitching options for tonight. We'll talk about those in just 1 second. But first, we've got some exciting news over at NumberFire. Beginning now, you can find all the NumberFire content from the analysts you know over at a new home called FanDuel Research. FanDuel Research is on the FanDuel domain, meaning you can now do your own research on the same site where you place your bets and submit your daily fantasy lineups. And don't worry, all the NumberFire tools are still in place over at NumberFire.com, so your daily process can remain the same for right now. As a thank you for your years of loyalty, we'll be running free rolls over on FanDuel Research now through the end of NFL season. Next week, we posted next week. To get that, go to FanDuel.com/research to find the link to the free roll. Again, it's an exclusive free roll, so you can only find it on FanDuel Research. So next week, go to FanDuel.com/research to find an article with a link to that free roll. Pitching preview for this Friday main slate: Garrett Cole comes in with the highest salary on FanDuel. His salary is $11,000, followed by Kevin Gausman at $10,900. We got Max Scherzer coming in at $10,800, followed by Zach Wheeler at $10,600. Logan Webb's salary is $10,500 with Mitch Keller at $10,200. Sonny Gray is $10,100, and Shane McClanahan down to $9,900. Joe Musgrove in a tough matchup with the Rangers is at $98,000. We got Logan Gilbert at $97,000. Lucas Giolito making his Angels debut at $9,500. Jordan Montgomery at $94,000. Christian Javier facing the Rays at $9,000. We got Mackenzie Gore, Bobby Miller, Tommy Henry, and JP Sears as the others at $8,000 or higher. Now, with a lot of top-end guys for tonight, there are a lot of ways you could play things. There are a lot of guys you could defend as being the top guy. My top guy is in a revenge game. That is Max Scherzer taking on the Nationals, and it's partly the revenge game, or like 0% the revenge game, but it's mostly because Scherzer is pitching pretty well right now, and I do want to be on him as a result of that. This matchup is not great for strikeouts because the Nationals are at just a 19% strikeout rate against righties, which is the second lowest number on the slate. But Scherzer is back to being in a groove once again. He's gone back to using his cutter more over his past 12 starts, and in that time, he has a 3.41 skill interactive ERA with a 29% strikeout rate and a low walk rate. He's doing that while getting good enough batted ball data to get by. The ERA for Scherzer in this span is still 3.95, but most of the poor outings have come against good teams like the Braves, the Red Sox, the Padres, and the Nationals aren't that right now. We also have not seen Scherzer face this team in this time, which means they're not super familiar with his repertoire, at least at this moment. And Scherzer has upside. He's had 10 strikeouts once in the span. He had 9 strikeouts in 3 others. Plus, he had 3 more games with 8 strikeouts. So even with a low strikeout matchup, my numbers do still have Scherzer projected for 6.9 strikeouts tonight. That's good enough to put him firmly on the radar. Once you combine it with the low earned run expectation of Scherzer against this team. So to me, Max Scherzer is a top guy for tonight. It is a lot of competition. You could justify a lot of guys, especially Scherzer being in a lower strikeout matchup, but I want Scherzer, so he is my top guy for tonight. I think I probably need to put Kevin Gausman second. It's between him and Garrett Cole. Cole could have some weather concerns there, as mentioned. Both these guys have tough matchups. Cole facing the Orioles, Gausman facing the Angels, but Gausman's at home with the roof likely closed tonight, which does move the needle pretty heavily in his favor and does make Gausman my number 2. The Angels definitely are not a good matchup, even without Mike Trout. They have a 113 WRC plus against righties in the current active roster and a 203 ISO. So they can get to you. And Gausman does struggle at times with allowing too much hard contact. But the strikeout rate for the Angels, slightly above average against righties, and Gausman is getting a lot of those right now. He's been throwing more sliders his past 11 starts, and in that time, he has a 31% strikeout rate. He has hit double digits 3 times in that stretch. He had 13 in one game, 12 in another, and all those spike games, the double-digit strikeout games, came at home, which is where he is at for tonight. Now, Gausman can have bad starts, and that's why he's below Scherzer, because there's more safety there given the respective matchups. But I think that with Gausman's matchup, he may be a hair better in terms of like 100th percentile ceiling projection due to strikeouts. And I actually do have Gausman projected for more strikeouts for tonight. I have Gausman projected for 7.6, and again, Scherzer is at 6.9, so actually a decent gap. But again, tougher matchup for Gausman facing the Angels while Scherzer gets the Nationals. That does matter at a certain point. So I'm going to favor Scherzer, but there is at least a case to be made for Gausman for tonight. So I'm going to go Scherzer 1, Gausman 2 among the studs. For the value play, I'm going to go Bobby Miller. I don't know if I've talked about Miller as a pitching option yet so far this year, but he's another guy pitching in decent weather, with it being 82 degrees in Los Angeles for this slate. That's actually pretty cold. And Miller's been making some tweaks recently that I do like. So it's enough for all to consider him here at $8,700 and make him the top value. The tweak that Miller has made is that he's been throwing fewer sinkers his past 4 starts. That sinker has just a 15% whiff rate on it, according to Baseball Savant, which is the lowest of any pitch for him. And his other pitches, like the off-speed ones, all get whiffs. And they do get some ground balls too at times. So fewer sinkers for Miller, I think, is optimal and the way he should be playing things. Across those 4 starts of fewer sinkers, his skill interactive ERA is 3.66. He has a 24% strikeout rate, and the batted ball data is not pristine, but it's still okay. His ERA 4.50. I think he looks better than that right now. We did see Miller hold the Rangers largely in check last week on the road. He was good enough against the Mets, also on the road. Now, he's at home against the Reds, and obviously they're not a team we want to target, especially with a team that struggles to hold opposing base runners in check like the Dodgers do. But their WRC plus is 102 for the Reds. It's fine. It's not something we need to avoid, I don't think. I think we can go with them in spots, and this is a spot where I'd like to do so. I have Miller projected for 5.9 strikeouts, so he's 1 behind Scherzer, 1.5 or so behind Gausman as well. It's not, I'd rather get to the studs, but it is great for the value plays tonight. So I'll check out Miller at 87. Might not get there in my player pool, but I'm open to it if I decide that I want to for tonight. The potential case for using a value play is because I want to stack the Atlanta Braves, and they got a lot of high salaries on them. So may need to use Miller if I want to go full stack on the Braves. Let's talk about the Braves and talk about the stacks for tonight. Adrian Hauser is facing the Braves in Atlanta tonight. He just saw the Braves last week, and he had 10 strikeouts in that game. Pitched really well, but now they've seen him recently, and this time it's in a very hot Atlanta. So I think we should stack the Braves tonight. Hauser was cooking with the strikeouts in that game. Very impressive. But it's also a pretty big deviation from what's normal for him. Hauser's been throwing fewer four-seamers for his past 8 outings now, and his strikeout rate in that time is 19%. 19% includes last week's game. So it was pretty odd. And when the Braves did make contact, they hit that ball hard. They had 4 barrels across 14 balls in play with a 50% hard hit rate. So I would say Hauser probably got a bit lucky to go 6 innings in that one, let up just 3 earned runs. The Braves have a 117 WRC plus against righties with a 221 ISO, which ranks tops in the slate. It's a pretty tough spot for Hauser to be in. I think it's great what he did in that game. Very impressive, but I'm skeptical he can do it again. So I think we should go at the Braves and hope they have better luck this time around. When going at the Braves, I do want to bump up the lefties here. Lefties have a 43% fly ball rate against Hauser, whereas righties are just 25%, which doesn't mean don't use the righties, but it does mean, like, if you're weighing Matt Olson against Sean Murphy, I'm going to give the edge to Olson for sure. Salary's pretty similar. So all else equal, go with the lefty every time. Don't bump down the righties too much because they're all very good, but do give some preference to lefties when deciding which guys to put in your Braves stack. The other side of that game is Yonny Chirinos, who is making his Braves debut. And Chirinos struggled with the Rays. He gets a good matchup here with the Brewers, but I do still think the struggles could be there, which is why I think the Brewers are in play for stacking tonight as well. Chirinos' ERA was 4.02 before he got DFA'd, but the underlying numbers were much worse than that. So there's a reason he was let go. Most recently, Chirinos had cut back on his slider usage. In that time, he had a 5.03 skill interactive ERA with a 13% strikeout rate and a 52% hard hit rate allowed. He had rough outings against the Royals in that time, 2 of them, actually. And I think that can give us faith here because the Brewers are still scuffling for sure. But they did just add Carlos Santana, 93 WRC plus against righties, but great park for hitting tonight. They do add Santana. I like the matchup. So I think we should give the Brewers a sniff here, given all things considered. Now, I mentioned Santana. He's going to be a switch hitter, but I do think it's helpful here that Chirinos struggles with righties because I want to get to Willy Adames, and Adames' salary is low, hasn't been perfect this year by any means, but does still have upside. And also, it helps the appeal of William Contreras a little bit, well, second revenge game on the slate. I definitely still like Christian Yelich as a lefty. Not going to bump down the lefties, but it does make it easier to sell myself on the righties when it's a guy like Chirinos who does struggle quite a bit with same-handed batters. Finally, for our third stack, let's talk here about the Dodgers. I do like some of what Brandon Williamson has been doing recently, where his velocity is up, and it's really helped his peripherals. But he's still lagging in some areas, and he has to face the Dodgers tonight. So I think we should check them out for stacking as a result. It is a 7-start sample for Williamson with the velocity up. His ERA in that time is 3.94, and he's coming off 2 really nice starts. He has not let up more than 3 earned runs in any of this 7-start sample. So Williamson is pitching very well, and you can explain it because he's suppressing hard contact. He's letting up just a 36% hard hit rate in this time, which is a better than average number. So Williamson throwing the ball harder, making gains as a result, and making gains in areas that are probably sustainable with the hard contact suppression. So that's a good number, but it's also not elite, and his fly ball rate is 42%. And that's while getting just a 20% strikeout rate. And the Dodgers are a team that can make you pay if you let up balls in play because they have a 110 WRC plus against lefties with a 215 ISO and a 44% fly ball rate. If Williamson makes mistakes, they will take full advantage and put that ball in the seats. And I do think that's possible here. So even with Williamson trending up, I do think we should look into batters facing him for tonight, which means going at the Dodgers for stacking here. Now, I think this Dodgers team, kind of interesting now because they've made a couple trades which have shook up things for them against lefties. Enrique Hernandez made his Dodgers debut a couple nights ago, or I should say re-debut, and he hit 6th against the lefty there. And if you remember back in the day, Kike was always a guy we use against lefties because he crushed them. So putting that kind of guy at that spot in the order is interesting. He also did wind up playing the entire game. Just not sure if I trust that yet because the Red Sox let him go for a reason. He wasn't hitting lefties well at all. That's concerning. We also have Chris Taylor here, who is phenomenal. I will put Chris Taylor above Kike Hernandez for sure. Ahmed Rosario, I'd probably put above Kike Hernandez as well. So to me, if you're ranking out the platoon-esque righties, I would go with Chris Taylor 1, Ahmed Rosario 2, and Kike Hernandez 3. And I'm probably not going to get to Kike tonight, despite the fact there were some somewhat encouraging things within the way he was used in that re-debut for the Dodgers. So ranking him third among the value platoon guys for tonight. Let's go to things to watch. I mentioned before, I do like Zach Wheeler if they're able to play in Pittsburgh. Just not sure if that'll happen necessarily. Wheeler has really hit his stride recently with a lot of strikeouts and minimal walks. He has a decent matchup here with the Pirates. I think he's in play if we get the all clear on weather. I just don't know if we'll do that. I'd probably rank him below Gausman for tonight still, but he's at least in that tier for tonight. Both sides of Coors Field are viable, but they're more fine than anything. It's because neither team can hit lefties well. The Rockies, a 73 WRC plus against lefties. The A's are at 78. So I don't mind looking into them. I don't mind them for one-offs, but it's really hard to go super, super crazy with those two teams when they're both facing lefties for tonight. Finally, I'm not opposed to giving the Rays a swing here. They're facing Christian Javier, who's a great pitcher. Love Christian Javier, but really struggling right now, not getting enough strikeouts. He has a 4.84 ERA across 12 starts with fewer curveballs. The Rays offense not as scary as it once was, but I do still think they could be interesting here, especially if they're not heavily rostered. So the Rays, to me, could be a pivot if they wind up going overlooked as a result of the name value that Christian Javier does carry. Let's finish things up here with dinger calls for tonight. The boring one, teased before, Matt Olson facing off against Hauser in Atlanta. Very warm weather, great for hitting for tonight. Olson, phenomenal lefty, so we're going to go with him as the boring home run call for today. For the fun one, let's go Chris Taylor. He's been awesome against lefties for a very long time. Facing one today at Dodger Stadium, which is not the best park for homers tonight because it is not as warm as some other spots in the slate, but do still like Taylor quite a bit. So we'll go with Matt Olson and Chris Taylor as our dinger calls for today. That's all we got here on the solo shot for today and this week. Once again, next week, Tom Vecchia will be with you Monday through Friday, breaking down each main slate on the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Find that wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe to get those as they go live. And again, the video portion will return the following week on FanDuel's YouTube page and on FanDuel TV Plus. If you got any questions for me, you can check me out on Twitter. I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. Also, do not forget to follow FanDuel Research at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in and have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy next week as well. We'll talk to you once again in about 10 days. This has been the solo shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.